4, 3. Welcome to our ordinary council meeting, 21st of March 2023. As the meeting chair, I give my consent for this open council meeting to be streamed live, recorded and published online. Anyone who is invited to read out a question or a presentation will be recorded, and their voice, image and comments will form part of the live stream and recording. The chair and/or the CEO have the discretion and authority at any time to direct the termination or interruption of live streaming. Such direction will only be given in exceptional circumstances where deemed relevant. Circumstances may include instances where the content of debate is considered misleading, defamatory, or potentially inappropriate to be published. The stream will stop prior to the closed section of the meeting and will recommence for the conclusion of the meeting. The public is able to view this live stream via our website at www.pyrenees.vic.gov.au. Should technical issues prevent the continuation of the stream, the meeting will be adjourned until the issue is resolved, or the meeting will be postponed to another time and date in accordance with the council's meeting procedures and governance rules. Please stand for the opening prayer. Heavenly Father, we ask you to give your blessing to this council, direct and prosper its deliberations to the advancement of your glory and the true welfare of the people of the Pyrenees Shire. Amen. Amen. Thank you. We acknowledge the people past and present of the Wadawurrung, Dja-dja-wurrung, Eastern Ma and Watchabollock tribe whose lands forms the Pyrenees Shire. We pay our respects to the customs, traditions and stewardship of the land by the elders and people of these tribes on whose land we meet today. As we're all present, there are no apologies. Any notices of disclosure of interest by councillors or officers to be declared? Councillor Clark.
Just like to the minutes not doing something with Graham now, just in terms of BNI West has an effect on the Western Renewables Link potentially and on potentially an effect of the Western project.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Item 7. We have a recommendation that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of council held on 21st of February 2023 and confidential meeting of council held on 21st of February 2023 as previously circulated to councillors be confirmed. Moved Councillor Keogh, seconded Councillor Vance. All those in favour? Carried. Is there any business arising out of those minutes? None. Thank you. Public participation, question time and public submissions. Members of the public are encouraged to ask questions or submit submissions at ordinary council meetings. Members of the public may attend the meeting in person to verbally ask a question or have a submission. All attendees must register by midday on the day of the meeting. To register, either call 1300 797 363 or visit pyrenees.vic.gov.au about Pyrenees Shire Council, council meetings attendance. Members of the public who are unable to attend in person can participate in question time by submitting their questions in writing, either online, through the council website, by mail or hand delivered. A person can ask a maximum of 2 questions at any one meeting on any topic, and the questions and responses shall not exceed 5 minutes. Questions are to be received by 12 noon on the day of the meeting. Questions are read by the chairperson during public participation. The chairperson or councillor or council officer to whom the question is referred may immediately answer the question or take the question on notice for the next ordinary council meeting. Members of the public who are unable to attend in person to make a submission on an agenda item may do so in writing, either online through council's website, by mail or hand delivered. Chair will allocate a maximum of 5 minutes to each person who wishes to address council. Submissions are to be received by 12 noon on the day of the meeting. There will be no discussion or debate with the public attendee. However, councillors may ask questions for clarification of the attendee. And we have a question from Gemma Millard from Lexton. Good morning, council. I'm submitting this on behalf of my mother who resides in Lexton. I'm seeking an update on a permit status of Rainbow Serpent Festival so my family can be aware of volunteering opportunities to rent their land and house. This is an annual venture conducted by my family, offering accommodation to visitors seeking to arrive ahead of the date or leave Lexton after the event closure. It is my family's way of offering options to ensure community safety. I have contacted the event, but as our contribution has no affiliation, have not had a response. Greatly appreciate an update on status so my family can plan around the event. Sincere apologies if this is unrelated to council and if this question impacted your time. Thank you, Gemma, for your question. I'll ask Mr. Gowans to respond for you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Millard, for your question. I can confirm that the former Rainbow Serpent Festival permit expired in 2020 and that there are currently no approvals in place to allow the festival to occur at Jack Smith's Lane, Lexton. I am aware that the festival organisers are currently navigating an approval process that involves amending the Pyrenees planning scheme, and I can confirm our planning department are actively involved in this process. Further, I wish to take the opportunity to advise that some types of accommodation require planning approvals and registration under the Public Health and Wellbeing Regulations 2020. It would be remiss of me to not encourage that you seek further advice prior to making your property available for accommodation.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. Questions from the gallery? Roger, I believe you have a question.
Yes.
Could you just step up to the microphone, please?
Thank you for the opportunity to ask the question. It's regarding the parking around the rotunda and the lack of marking on the road. I park there quite frequently, and I've noticed that there's two problems. One is the traffic entering from Livingston Street and then taking a shortcut through to the IGA down the back lane, and people then moving from the parking area around the rotunda to do a right-hand turn into Livingston Street and then into Neil Street. And there's no marking at all. And quite often, because the area is so wide, they all tend to cut the corner pretty sharply. And it just amazes me. There's been a couple of close calls that I've seen. It just amazes me that people haven't run into each other yet. So I think there needs to be marking there. And the other issue is that on the exit, there's a sign saying no entry onto Neil Street. There's only one sign on the left-hand side as you actually enter in, but a lot of cars try to go out through that exit area the wrong way because they only see the left-hand side sign they do not see because they're looking up Neil Street towards the lights. So they miss the light. And quite frequently you get cars coming in both directions. So it just needs extra signing there.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Gowans.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Andrew, for your question. Your question has a fair bit of merit in seeking some further consideration of traffic movement in that area, and I will take it on notice to undertake a review of the car park, both in terms of line marking and in terms of extra signage. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. Anyone else from the gallery would like to ask a question? No, thank you very much for your attendance. Item 10, items for noting. Please, councillors. We have a motion to accept, moved councillor Clark, seconded councillor Ferrari. Any discussion, councillors? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a comment to Ms. Bramwell to say thank you for the additional detail in the CARS report. Gives us a much better sense of where things are at when we know the ones that are actively actioned and those that are just being worked through. Thank you very much. So please continue that.
No further discussion, councillors. I'll move the motion. All those in favour? Carried. And coming up. Feedlot?
19, economic development. Page 19.
Page 9. Economic Development Report. There we are. Mr. Nolan, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to provide council with some information in respect of the state of the economy in the Pyrenees Shire and to provide an update to council on the implementation of council's economic strategy, which is referred to as Economic Development Towards 10,000, which was adopted by council in March 2020. So the report, councillors, I'll take as having essentially been read. There are a number of graphs in there that provide some comparison in terms of how council is currently performing, and in terms of the not so much council but the economy. Some points to note, however, and reference is made in this report to not only the economic strategy, the council plan, and the Central Highlands Regional Economic Development Strategy, all of which highlight the importance of us to keep an eye on how our economy is tracking and to be active in that space. So some significant sort of things to note from an employment and jobs perspective. Jobs have increased from 1,744 to 2,219 during the period 2011 to 2021, so over a 10-year period. Population has grown from 6,759 to 7,613 over the same period. Real estate values have significantly increased, and the value of all property categories within the Pyrenees has risen from $1,505 million in 2011 to almost double that in 2021, and particularly a significant increase in farming land. Agriculture continues to remain the dominant sector in our economy, providing about half of the jobs that exist in our shire. Construction industry has in that time emerged over the last 10 years with significant contributions from wine manufacturing and tourism, which remain important. In terms of output, so this is the economic output from all activities within the shire. In the period, the 10-year period from 2011 to 2021, output has increased from $488 million to $648 million. So that's a significant increase in terms of what's produced within the shire that leaves the shire. So that's significantly contributed to by agriculture, sheep, cattle and grains are the most significant sectors. Then there's some further commentary within the report in respect of the agriculture sector, given that they employ half of people and that they contribute to a large percent of what's out of the output. More specifically in respect of the commodities of relevance. So in beef and sheep, for example, there's a 10-year graph there that shows the growth over that 10-year period. And of significance, it's worth noting that in the last little bit, the 22-23 financial year, there's been a slight decline from from a high in 2020, 2021. In respect of wool, you note the 10-year projection that's shown in the graph there. Certainly in the last 5 years, there's been a decline from the peak in 2018-19 period. In terms of wheat export prices, so a significant sort of issue for many of our farmers, obviously important commodity. You can see the projection there that during the peak of from February to June 2022, in the middle of last year, wheat prices were significantly high, and there's been an adjustment in the October quarter to levels that have been more consistent with the previous months. Other issues affecting the economy, obviously the 2022 floods, and council's received a specific report in respect of that. But again, it would appear that from the research that's been undertaken to date, that the impact of that flood event has represented about 7% of agricultural production has been impacted by that. Further then, in terms of living standards, it's worth noting that the median household income in the Pyrenees has risen in that 10-year period from around $732 to $1,101 in 2021. So it's been somewhat of an increase in median household incomes, but of significance, it is still well below the average or the median household income for all Victoria, which indicates a significant ongoing concern for council in terms of parts of our community that are disadvantaged. In terms of recent economic activities, there's certainly been a lot of work done around the Pyrenees water supply feasibility study, and that's been subject to a separate report to council. And that's obviously got a long-term objective about growing the economy in the ag sector. The Lake Caravan Park is an important sort of tourism project from a council perspective, and that's currently underway. The shop facade program is one in which councillors continue to invest in improving our streetscapes and the facades for our businesses. Events have been a significant area of activity in recent months, and certainly since things have calmed down after COVID. And there's a number of events that are sort of listed there for that period, March through to May. And of course, the most recent event was the Beaufort Agricultural Show on the weekend, which was a great success and had been transferred from late last year and been affected by a flood. Tourism was subject to a separate report to council, and council resolved to participate in the regional tourism body. And of course, tourism continues to be a focus for this council, and council's commitment to contribute to be part of that tourism body. There's some further information there in respect of flood activities and the amount of activity that's that our economic development unit has done to support the range of properties that have been impacted by that flood. And of course, we have Blaze Aid that's doing, and Landmate teams from Langy Calcal that are doing great work in supporting our farming communities. And maintaining communication with local businesses and farmers has also been something that's been important from the point of view of our economic unit. In respect of the economic strategy, which council adopted, is a 10-year strategy, and that was adopted in 2020. And there's a separate attachment to this report which sets out what those 32 actions in that report are, and what progress has been made against each of those actions. Of the 32 actions, 7 have been completed. And amongst those that have been completed are things like the development of Correa Park to create additional housing stock in Beaufort. There are 10 that are in progress and 6 involve ongoing work. And then 9 that have not been commenced at this stage. Bear in mind, this is a 10-year undertaking. So there's still plenty of work to be done. The report also identifies a number of activities over the next quarter that our economic unit will be involved in. And Mr. Mayor, that is essentially a bit of a snapshot of our local economy. There's plenty more that could be said and provided. But the recommendation is that council notes the report that continues to support the farmers impacted by the 2022 floods to access financial support through the various government programs, bearing in mind that a number of those farmers have not yet taken up that option, and that council looks to share aspects of this economic data contained in this report with residents and businesses as part of council's future engagement where appropriate, and that council receives a further report on activities in 3 months.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Moved Councillor Vance, seconded Councillor Keogh. Councillor Vance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nice to see we're going ahead.
Yes.
Yes, and going ahead with leaps and bounds. I guess that's a report on the past. I'm not too sure what's in store for us into the future. I am going off to a meeting in Bendigo on Thursday to discuss whether or not council is drought ready. That dreaded word, drought. But obviously, we all know that good seasons don't keep coming up every year, or they haven't done in past history.
It rained today.
Yeah, we've had 3 great seasons in a row, so that contributed, no doubt, to our success. As I said, we can't predict the future, but we need to be ready for all things, and it's good to know that at this stage we're going ahead anyway. Thank you.
No. Any other councillors? We have a motion, councillor. All those in favour? Carried. Proposed cattle feedlot for Avoca. Mr. Gowans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to provide council with the information relevant to making a determination on planning permit application PA 22080 for the use and development of land for a cattle feedlot at Fields Lower Homebush Road, Homebush. Council received the planning permit application for a 4,000 standard cattle unit, beef cattle feedlot and associated buildings and works. The proposed feedlot is to be constructed and operated in accordance with a Class A feedlot as specified in the Victorian Code for Cattle Feedlots. Additionally, it will be expected to comply with the National Beef Cattle Feedlot Environmental Code Practice and the National Guidelines for Beef Cattle Feedlots in Australia. A Class A feedlot conforms to the highest standards of design, construction, operation, maintenance, pen management, cleaning frequency, and runoff control system management of all of the classes. The proposed feedlot consists of 36 production pens, hospital and holding pens, shedding and cover, solid waste and manure and carcass composting area, and 2 sediment basins, among other things. The subject land is 71.5 hectares in size and is made up of 7 individual lots, all within single ownership. It is located approximately 4.1 kilometres northeast of the Avoca Township, with access being along Fields Lower Homebush Road. The application was advertised pursuant to Section 52 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987 and included written correspondence to all landholders within 2.5 kilometre radius of the proposed site, public notice published in the Pyrenees Advocate and published on Council's website. 3 submissions were received. The themes raised in the submissions have been summarised in the report and have the following issues raised. concern that the feedlot could impact on the quality of surface water runoff, concern around effluent being transported on vehicle tyres, concern around the current condition of Fields Lower Homebush Road and its capacity to accommodate additional vehicles associated with the proposal, concern with the impacts of additional traffic on neighbouring farming operations, concerns around amenity impacts, concerns around property devaluation and health impacts. In response to the submissions, the applicant provided a written response and is contained in the body of the report. In addition to the response being provided to the submitters, a mediation meeting was facilitated by council officers. Following this, all 3 submissions remain as originally submitted. The key considerations applying to this application relate to the sustainable agricultural land use, environmental impacts and off-site amenity impacts. There is clear support within the provisions of the farming zone and the planning policy framework for agricultural land uses, such as the proposed cattle feedlot, provided that they are operated in a controlled and sustainable manner. The application is accompanied by a detailed and thorough report which examines all facets of the proposed cattle feedlot, ranging from wastewater management and soil quality to odour, noise and operational management. The proposal is compatible with surrounding land uses, typically being used for dryland agriculture. There are several dwellings scattered within the border region. It is considered that the report provided by the applicant suitably addresses the potential amenity impacts resulting from the proposed cattle feedlot, and conditions will be placed on any permit issued to reinforce the mitigation methods specified within the report. Impacts on local traffic and road infrastructure as a result of the increased heavy vehicle use have been considered. It's proposed to manage and mitigate, where possible, any such traffic and road impacts through the application of planning permit conditions that require specific infrastructure upgrades to be undertaken by the permit holder prior to the commencement of the proposed use. Therefore, it's the officer recommendation that council issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit for the land at Fields Lower Homebush Road for the use and development of land for a cattle feedlot and associated buildings and works with conditions. And the conditions which are in the report include conditions around requirements for amended plans prior to undertaking the development, consolidation of 7 lots, a landscape plan, car parking, vehicle access, drainage plans and construction, and road upgrade works, as well as conditions around on-site stormwater detention, and also conditions around vehicle washdown bays requirements, which have been distributed to council separately. And I'll leave it in council's hands.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Council, we have a motion before us. Can I have someone move? Moved, Councillor Clark, seconded, Councillor Vance, Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. If I could begin with a couple of questions, please, to Mr. Gowans. Firstly, the fields have been operating a feedlot in quite close proximity now for a number of years, I think about 7 or 8 years. Have there been any issues with the management of that of which council is aware, please?
Through Mr. Mayor, thank you, Councillor Clark, for your question. There have been issues with odour that have been reported to council, but the most recent odour complaint that came to council that we have on record was 2018. Those particular odours have been reported from residents within the Avoca Township. However, the application before us does have to deal with odour and the EPA requirements around odour, so does the existing feedlot. This feedlot has been designed as a Class A facility, which hopefully will mitigate through its design issues associated with odour. Thank you.
And a second question, if I could. I note the referral authorities there have all either given us some conditions or given us some guidance in the sense of things. The catchment authority isn't included as a referral authority. Is that because there's no prescribed waterways in that area, please, Mr. Cairns?
Thank you, Councillor Clark, for your question. That's correct. This site is on an elevated site within the area, and there aren't any designated waterways within proximity of the proposed feedlot. However, surface water runoff is a concern and is addressed through conditions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think one of the things that we have to realise is that we're just a bit of a piece in the puzzle in these things of this scale, given that the EPA, particularly in agriculture Victoria, creates a significant range of rules and effectively guidelines for these types of facilities. I think what council has done here importantly is addressed what is key to the community in the context of just the road movements, and there's some quite specific things in this recommendation about actually improving the road and those types of things, considered those issues. I think it's fair to say that there will be some impact in that kind of thing. You can't create something of this scale and not have some impact, but I think it's about what's reasonable in a farming zone. This is a farming zone. It's designed for these things in that sense, and the proponent's very aware of that in the context of having met all the requirements of the code in terms of the application. In that sense, I think it's logical the council would support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Vance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I fully endorse Councillor Clark's remarks, and I also understand the spin-offs with the townspeople, but to the other side of the cycle, feeding 8,000 head of cattle is going to require a lot of grain and hay, and that's going to have big benefits for the farming community, not just around Avoca. They're going to have to go further afield than that to bring feed in. And it's an industry that I feel will benefit the town more than the downside of it. The wind doesn't always blow from the north. It spends more time blowing from the south, as I understand it in recent times. So I fully support the project.
Thank you, Councillor Vance. Any other councillors? All right, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. Burnbank Creek Footbridge. Thank you, Mr. Gowans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is for council to consider the results of the community consultation on whether to remove the Burnbank Creek footbridge in Lexington. A request was made by members of the Lexington community at the November 2022 Community Cuppa to remove the footbridge that crosses Burnbank Creek to reduce the impact from future floods. The general view of the 20 residents present at the Community Cuppa was that the footbridge should be considered for removal. This was further implied in a petition from the Lexington community presented to council in December 2022 to clean up the Burnbank Creek, which contained 68 signatures. A wider community consultation process needed to be undertaken before council could progress with the proposed action of removing the footbridge. The methodology for the consultation, including directing respondents to an online survey via notices on the footbridge itself, in the local community at the Lexington Post Office and pub, on council's website, Facebook, and in notice board printed in the Pyrenees Advocate and the Maryborough Advertiser. The community engagement project ran for a period of 3 weeks, with submissions closing on Friday the 17th of February. There were 28 people who responded to the survey. A total of 22 voted to keep the footbridge and 6 were in support of removal of the footbridge. Considering the feedback, council has several options open to it. Council could remove the footbridge immediately, potentially wait until a full flood study has been undertaken for Lexington, which can model how the footbridge contributes to flood impact and whether removal will mitigate extensive future floods, or potentially look at an alternative design to what is currently at the footbridge to lessen the impact on the bridge waterway area. There is some commentary in the report about a full flood study for Lexington if mitigation modelling was required. And a full flood study for Lexington is estimated to cost in the order of $100,000. We've since been notified today that the government has recently announced a grant for fully funding high priority flood studies. So therefore, council's contribution may not be required in this particular consideration. It is evident from, however, there is a timing delay in any particular flood study. It is evident from the community consultation, specifically the one that the council undertook online, that council, that most of the respondents are in favour of retaining the Burnbank Creek. However, that is in contradiction to the other consultations where we heard directly from the community. Therefore, it's the officer recommendation that council models the impact of how the footbridge contributes to flood impact in Lexington through undertaking a full flood study. The council commits the own source funding contribution of up to $35 to undertake a full flood study for Lexington in order to apply for the next round of the risk resilience program that is available at the end of March. However, I've just spoken to that may not be required to be in there, and that council commits to removing the footbridge if the modelling indicates that localised flooding is exacerbated by retaining the bridge.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. We have a motion, councillors. Do I have someone, Councillor Clark? Alternate. Do you have a seconder for? That might be a good idea, mightn't it?
Yeah. So what I would propose to move is recommendation again in three parts. The first part would be the council remove the Burnbank Creek footbridge prior to winter. Second is, as per the recommendation in your report, about the sourcing funding for the flood study. And thirdly, requesting that Regional Roads Victoria remove as many barriers as possible from the Beaufort Talbot Road Bridge, which is the bridge near the hotel, so that it can actually function more effectively as well. If I had a seconder.
Seconded, Councillor Ferrari. Now, do we need to vote on accepting the amendment or then discuss it?
No, it's not an amendment. It's just a motion,
Okay.
because this was just a recommendation.
Alternative
So,
motion.
so you've got a live motion now.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think the important thing here in this is putting the numbers together. There was 20 people at our first meeting, and we remember it wasn't heated, but it was a pretty intense meeting. It was basically only 4 weeks after we had that flood event in Lexington, and we'd actually at Lexington, I think it had 2 flood events at that stage about a fortnight apart. We had 20 people at that meeting at the hall. We then had the petition that followed that not long after, I think presented to the December meeting of council, 68 signatures. And now we've done some further consultation in that sense of things. So we've had about 110 people respond. Out of that, nearly 90 have said, please remove the footbridge. Now, the footbridge is pretty clear that it's there, and it is an impediment. Is it a huge impediment? It's really a bit hard to tell, but it is a huge impediment if you're starting to get a whole heap of debris hanging on it, stopping the creek. And as I tried to explain to some of the locals, if the creek in Lexington at the time, and it's 25 metres wide and it's a metre deep, you can't dig a creek in Lexington big enough to put 5 square metres of water down and not have the flood of the town. But I think this is a sign of faith to the community that we've actually listened to them, that we actually do take the bridge away, because the bridge is it's well over spec for what it needs to be, and it could be designed in a much better way if we were going to put a footbridge there. And that's a separate question for another time. But it certainly does create an impact, and I think it creates an impact quite locally. And my sense is it is a really good thing that we would actually take it away and show the community that we've acted in that context. The fact that we're going to clean the creek out is really important, and Mr. Gowans alludes to that in the report in the context that we've got a contractor engaged to do that. And again, that will help, I think, the community's hearts and minds. It won't help as much with the flood as I think they think it will. And that is the reality, as I said, when the water's 25 metres wide and a metre deep, you can't actually get it in a channel in that sense of things. But the flood study is really our next step to do a proper flood study, and absolutely council should support that today. The third point is new. It's not covered in the report, but it definitely was a clear issue. For those who don't know the Regional Roads Victoria Bridge near the pub, they put a fantastic mesh barrier on it so that someone can't jump off and commit suicide in the creek. Now, they'd only fall 5 feet, maybe 6 at the tops, and they'd basically still be able to touch the top of the bridge when they landed on their feet. But the barrier is made out of mesh that's that big, and it caught every single bit of debris that came down there. And of course, what did it do? It pushed the water around the bridge. It pushed it out onto the highway. You know, certainly in my life, it's the first time I've seen that house flooded. The first time I've seen all those logs at the front of the Toll Bar Park that have been there since 1989. First time I've seen them strewn across the place in 4 floods. So there's no doubt it's changed. One of the things that has changed. So again, I don't know, Mr. Gowans, whether you want to perhaps give council an update on where that's at with Regional Roads Victoria. Probably is helpful in the context of us making a decision, but I think it's appropriate that we would send a message as council to Regional Roads Victoria to do something about that as well before winter.
Mr. Gowans, I nearly upgraded you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Clark, for the opportunity to respond on what advocacy has been undertaken. We've had a meeting with, I have to get their name right now because they have changed names recently. They were Department of Transport, they're the Department of Transport and Planning. We had a meeting, the CEO and I had a meeting with some of the representatives a number of weeks ago now where we raised specifically this issue and provided some photographic evidence of the impact that the Department of Transport and Planning bridge had on collecting debris and potentially having an impact on how the flood waters are impeded. We are waiting on a formal response from the representatives from Department of Transport and Planning, but we're hopeful that we'll get a successful outcome there to lessen the impact for future floods.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Councillor Ferrari? Councillor Vance?
Just query council's role with the Burnbank Creek in clearing it out. Is that our role or is it the role of the CMA?
Through Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Gowans.
thank you, Councillor Vance, for your question. There has been some mixed information around where responsibility lies, and often it comes back to the definition of the creek in an urban area. Now, Lexington is a rural town, but I think from a CMA point of view, they determine creeks within a built-up area, a township, as an urban waterway. Therefore, council has some responsibility in maintaining an urban waterway. However, we can't maintain it or remove vegetation or soil without a permit from the Catchment Management Authority. So we still need to do that, but ultimately there is some definition around, well, where does that urban waterway start and stop? Because, you know, there's lots of build-up of vegetation within the creek, and again, you know, what's the impact of that build-up of vegetation and sediment in the creek, and how is that impacting floods? That's something a full flood study can go some way to help inform the community and use science and science-based decision making.
Yep. Thank you.
Councillors, we have an amended motion. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you very much. Corporate and Community Services Governance Rules 2023. Ms. Bramwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report is provided to Council to facilitate consideration and adoption of updated governance rules. New guidelines included as Appendix A, a revised Appendix B, and the procedural motions table updates, and Appendix C, election period policy. An annual review on the content of governance rules was conducted in early 2023, and the review identified areas that would benefit from clarification or updating, and the particular sections which are updated are detailed in the report. In addition to the clarification areas, a new section 11 was input, which provides for governance arrangements around the use of council's common seal. The council's common seal was formally included within the local law number 1, which was rescinded when the governance rules were developed, and an alternate policy was created for the governance seal. It's now felt that it would be more appropriate to form part of the governance rules. And once this inclusion is approved, the current policy around this will be rescinded. The new Appendix A, which is guidelines for public participation at council meetings, these are designed to strengthen council requirements about public participation processes and public behaviour at council meetings. And it's proposed that these will be provided to members of the gallery at all meetings in the future, subject to council's adoption. The Appendix B, which is procedural motions table updates. The review identified a potential issue with the wording of some items within that appendix, which might stop some motions being movable in certain circumstances. So this wording has been amended to correct that. An update of Appendix C was also done, which is the election period policy, which is mandated to be an appendix of the governance rules under the Local Government Act. And as part of the review into the governance rules, it was considered timely to include a revision of this supporting policy to reflect obligations leading up to the next local government general election, which is scheduled for late 2024. Further minor changes, since this report was written, further minor changes have been included in the governance rules and updated copies provided to the councillors before this meeting. However, those minor changes did not change the officer recommendation in this report. The officer recommendation is that council adopts the updated governance rules, including the new Appendix A guidelines for public participation at council meetings and a new Appendix B procedural motions table updates. Adopts the updated Appendix C election period policy. Resolves to rescind the council policy use of the council seal, governance requirements for which are now included within the governance rules, and requires council officers to provide a copy of Appendix A, the guidelines for public participation at council meetings, to members of the public at all in-person ordinary council meetings in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Bramwell. Moved Councillor Keogh, seconded Councillor Ferrari. Councillor Keogh.
Thank you. Just to say thanks to Kathy for all the work that goes into it. It's a really important document. It directs how we transparently and correctly run our meetings and a number of other things. So we thank you again, Kathy, for that.
Any other councillors? All those in favour? Carried. Australian Local Government Association National General Assembly. Mr Nolan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors would be familiar with this as National General Assembly, and the purpose of this report is to seek approval from Council for the participation of the Mayor and CEO at the National General Assembly and conference from 13th to 15th of June 2023. Amend the date of council briefing session in Avoca and the Cuppa and Chat and Patrick from Tuesday the 13th of June to Tuesday the 6th of June. Mr Mayor, the details around the Assembly and the purpose of the Assembly is outlined in the report. It's an opportunity for council to participate in the national issues of national significance which impact on local communities, and the opportunity to advocate on these issues in conjunction with Elga, who is the sector leader in this space.
Thank you, Mr Nolan. We have moved councillor Ferrari, seconded councillor Keogh. Any discussion, councillors? All those in favour? Carried. V&I West consultation report. Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is for council to consider a submission to be made in response to the V&I West options assessment report. So, Mr. Mayor, for the purposes of the gallery, there are two transmission lines that are of interest here. First is the Western Renewable Link line, which effectively is a 95 kilometre or 195 kilometre transmission line from Sunbury through to Bolgana that runs straight through the centre of Pyrenees Shire. And the second transmission line is a New South Wales connector, so a line that runs from southern New South Wales to connect into the other line that I mentioned, the Western Renewables Link. Now, Mr. Mayor, the subject of this report is in fact the latter, and that is the V&I West link project. Now, this line, as it's proposed in this consultation report, won't directly enter Pyrenees Shire. It actually connects with the Western Renewables link at Bolgana. However, a number of options were considered in the consultation report, including a terminal station at Warborough-Lexton as one of the options. Mr. Mayor, the report does identify that the preferred option for the terminal station is in fact at Bolgana. And just on that point, I think council could be cautiously supportive of that as an option, given that the alternative terminal station in Warborough would create a significant impact on a number of our landowners. And given the productive land that would be impacted, that would be a concern. So, Mr. Mayor, the options that have been considered are copied from the report and included in this report to council. There's a diagram of the connector and the options, and there's been a range of consultation that's occurred with AEMO, effectively the body that's actually undertaken this planning exercise. And council will recall that at the December 2022 council meeting, council actually had representatives from AEMO and AUSMET that actually presented to council at council meeting and delivered a presentation live stream to the audience of the council live stream. So there's been a range of engagements that have occurred since then and ahead of this report being tabled. There's also a consultation period currently underway, both within our community and the other communities that are affected by the V&I West project. The information is all available on the website. And of course, there had been a number of engagements and consultations within our community involving councillors and members of the community. Now, significantly, should the Bolgana terminal station option be not only preferred but adopted, then the impact of that is that the Western Renewable Link line will in fact be increased in its capacity from 220 kV line to a 500 kV line. So that effectively means taller towers and wider easement. So potentially those landowners that are going to host the Western Renewable Link transmission line will be more impacted by that result. And of course, in the various months that have occurred since the introduction of the Western Renewable Link project, council is well aware of the range of concerns that have been expressed about that project. Certainly, the issue of compensation to landowners has been one that's been a factor. And to that extent, it's worth highlighting, Mr. Mayor, that AusNet have just this week released a new publication that provides further clarification around the range of compensations that are available to landowners in that instance. And that includes, the more recent announcement by the Victorian government of an $8,000 per kilometre per annum compensation package available as well. So compensation is an important consideration. And of course, again, it's about being cautious in welcoming that because the significant issue there is whether in fact that's sufficient compensation for the loss of ability to farm the land, in compensation for the hosting of the transmission infrastructure. More broadly, the impact of the transmission infrastructure on the landscape and the broader community is something that's significant, and the cost of that, the compensation back to the community associated with that is something that we've raised. In fact, I raised today in a meeting involving the CEO of AusNet and the CEO of AEMO and the social licence that the government and the agencies involved should have in respect of any project that looks to create hard infrastructure in a rural community where the benefits of having done so would be the benefits of that project are sort of shared more broadly across the state, more in particular with high energy users. So compensation, social licence are significant issues. Other issues that council's well aware of, certainly there's been arguments in our community about whether this should be an above ground transmission line, whether it should be an underground transmission line. And at this point in time, whilst we're talking about the V&I West line, there is no provision shown in that for an underground transmission line. Whilst the Western Renewables Link residents and landowners impacted by that have been very vocal in seeking support from council to advocate for an underground line. And whilst council have been active in doing so, AusNet have provided a response to that advocacy, which demonstrates the challenges associated with an underground line. And that is something that council can continue to advocate for, being mindful of some of the constraints about being able to do so. The impact on the ability of farmers to be able to use their land for the farming activities, whether it be agricultural spraying or any other agricultural activity, has been something we've heard from our community, as well as the impact and the concern about firefighting and the use of equipment to be able to fight fires. So, Mr. Mayor, this is not essentially a report that identifies a response to the Western Renewable Link project, but it's important to understand that the V&I West project is going to have an impact on the Western Renewable Link. And so those factors come into play. And of course, what I'm recommending, Mr. Mayor, is that council provide a submission to the V&I West project, even though the proposed terminal station is at Bulgana outside our shire. It is appropriate for us to provide a submission, raise those concerns that have been expressed by the many community meetings and forums that we've participated where we've heard these issues, and actively continue to encourage residents and landowners to become informed about the report and attending the information sessions, and also to make their own submissions.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Councillors, we have a recommendation before us. Move to Councillor Clark. Seconded. Councillor Vance, Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I do think that we do need to make a response to this because the project does have a flow-on impact for us in terms of the Western Renewables link. And I'm like Mr Nolan, I'm using the word cautious, I think, very, very often in the context of this, because the map says it's going to Bulgana, but we don't know where in the context of that. But what we do know about Bulgana is that there's probably 4 wind farms there now and maybe another 3 or 4 at least proposed for the area. So if you're going to put it somewhere, put it where the activity is. And there's no doubt that Bulgana is logical in that case, as opposed to Warborough, where there's 1 wind farm and another one proposed in that context of things. And that's probably going to be the it in the sense. So I think, it would be logical the council would give in principle, but cautious support to that's the logical area in which to put that thing. I think I think we do need to make some comment on the impact to the Western Renewables link. And the only point I'd make tonight, the CEO's made a number of points, is that this is the 4th change to this project in 4 years. We had 220 project, we had a 500 project, we had a 220 project, we're now back to a 500 project. No wonder the community's given up. They've just completely done their head in the sense of dealing with the government and the powers that be on that one. Just the final one, Mr Mayor, I'd like to comment on, and I think we should make some comment about this, is the announcement by the government and what the CEO of AusNet said today, that they are prepared now to pay compensation of $8,000 a kilometre. And I don't know that $8,000 is the right figure, and I don't think it should be a lesser figure, let me be clear about that. But the fact that they finally recognised that we are going to get all this infrastructure so that the people in Melbourne can continue to walk up and down the street and have their electric cars and do all their thing when their world will not change, I think at last the message is getting through in that context of things. But I think we want to be really clear about the fact of that. If you read the statistics, they say that we need 9 times more renewable energy than what we have now to get to net zero. 9 times more than what's already in the landscape. And even if it's only 3 times more because they're bigger, that's a hell of a lot more change that we're going to get, and a hell of a lot more power lines, and a hell of a lot more wind turbines and, solar farms and all that kind of thing. 30 times more batteries. So same thing, whole heap more change coming in. It's not going to, I guarantee it won't happen in Newport, and it won't happen in Glen Iris, and it definitely won't be happening in Ivanhoe. It'll be happening in Pyrenees and in Moyne and in Southern Grampians and Northern Grampians and Ararat, like it is now. So the fact that we've got the principle now in place, now it's about talking about the money. And don't get me wrong, I don't think any person who's going to get one of these things is going to feel any better. But I think your government can at least put their hand on their heart and say, we recognise we're having an impact and we're prepared to do something about it. So we need to push that one hard. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Vance.
Mr Mayor, yeah, I endorse once again David's comments. Whether we like it or not, we're living in a world of change. And the change demand is predominantly, as David said, coming from the city people. Whether we like it or not, I've been farming for a long time now, and I've seen a lot of change in the seasons, and I'm yet to be convinced until I went to China. And you get up in the morning and the smog and the atmosphere was just crap. And I believe India is probably worse. Australia's making an honest effort, and we've got to support that. And it doesn't come without some pain. So with that pain, we need some compensation for the people that are affected. We are in a time of history being made. So if we're smart, we'll go along with it, I do believe. It's not a great deal of benefit to me, but it might be to my grandchildren's children or the future generations that are coming into this world. But the world is growing at a hell of a rate with their population, and that's a fair bit of the contributing factors, I believe.
Thank you, Councillor Vance. Anyone else? No, I support both of you. I think we're working very hard to understand what's being put before us, but as you say, they change it every year for 4 years. There's no guarantee what we discuss next year is going to be the same thing we're discussing now. So we'll keep going with the information basis that we have. We'll keep asking our community to keep up to date with the information that's being put before us. And we will put in a submission with regards to VNI West. Councillors, all those in favour? Carried. Councillor reports. Councillor Vance.
Mr Mayor, you're giving me a hiding going first all the time.
You weren't first last time.
Yeah, my word it was. But anyway, I'll forgive you. I haven't got a great deal to report. We were all involved at the Warborough Cuppa. I had to chair a hall committee AGM at Crowlands and also Redbank. After the Redbank AGM, I made a quick getaway to go to a water proposal meeting at Navarre, caught the second half of it. That was attended, I believe, by about, I made a quick assumption, maybe 70 or 80 people. It was quite a large attendance. And the only other meeting that I had was a rural council's meeting via Zoom on the 25th of February. That's my lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vance. Councillor Keogh.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I had a couple of fun events over the last month, and one of those was the International Women's Day event that was held in Skipton. It was an incredibly engaging event, very, very fun as well as informative, but with many local women who are presenting and a local Indigenous lady, Bonnie, who's always lovely to listen to. So it was great, and many participating from across locally and wider. So a really lovely event and a very unique event. So that was wonderful. I've also attended the Beaufort show just recently on the weekend, and I could see sponsors in our gallery of that support that show. But again, it's such a fantastic event. The committee that run it, the sponsors that support it, but also very much a community that get behind it. And being at a different time of the year, it was challenging for them to be able to run it similarly and to get those numbers, but they did a wonderful job. So we thank them for doing, everyone involved, for a terrific show. And we look forward to the one in November as well. So we all want to get on board for that one as well. And finally, today, just wishing everyone a very happy Harmony Day. I'm wearing my little bangle here, but just remembering always that, you know, we're always living lives, and we do in our community. We're very blessed to promote equality, inclusivity all the time. So we're always looking out for every single person and resident in our community. And the theme this year was everyone belongs. So I think it's a wonderful theme and one that we need to remember. But thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keogh. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to begin by thanking my fellow councillors and certainly the officers for their support in me putting my hand up for a second term at MOV. I'm very pleased to have got elected a couple of weeks ago and got a lot to do. And I know I speak for all the councils in the state. I really always want to make sure that the voice of small rural councils is there in among the mix, and sometimes it isn't as much as we need it to be in that sense of things. In that context, we've been doing quite a bit of work at the ALGA, so it's on the national board of the thing on the federal budget submission, of course, and over 40% of council's money here at Pyrenees comes from the federal budget, so we do very much appreciate that. And at the state, there's been a number of ministerial changes, and I've met with a number of ministers, Minister Brooks from Housing, Minister Kilkenny for Transport and Planning, Minister Horn, who is our local government minister, and Minister Stitt, who is the Early Years and Environment Minister. So I've been very busy in that space. In terms of my couple of jobs where I'm appointed by council to a couple of external committees, the Central Victorian Greenhouse Alliance and also the Highlands Local Learning and Employment Network, we've both met in February. So that's all been good. And in terms of local things, number of constituent matters, the briefings that we've done at Warborough and at Moonambell last week, Hideout Festival, which I think we probably talked about mostly in February. Was really pleased with Mr Nolan 2 weeks ago to actually chair the first meeting of the Lexington Hub Committee of Management. And they're a really good, enthusiastic group of people, and they really recognise the opportunity they've got in that new building to get some revenue and get it out there for events and those kind of things, and also to do a bit of work to actually engage the community to help them, not just to do it all on their own. So that went really well. And just the final one, I also had a meeting with our local member, Martha Haylett. So Martha had basically like a community drop-in session at Lexington a couple of weeks ago, and that went over very, very well. So I was there as well, listening in, and probably again about 12 of the locals, and no surprise to us, it was the flood, and then it was the power line, and then at that stage I had to go and get kids from school. So yeah, the issues, while they're for Martha, they're also very much for us. That's all for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not a real lot to report. The cuppa at Warburg and some meeting with some constituents. I encourage the constituents to continue to send in those queries, either phone call or an email. We will have them followed up. It's important that they do that. And sometimes they tell us things we simply don't know. They see something or they know something we don't know, and it's good to hear. So we try and get back to them as soon as we can. Also went to the Beaufort show. It was really fantastic. And it was a really good attendance. I thought it was a really, really good attendance, and I congratulate the committee on their perseverance, because normally it's in November, as we know, but it couldn't be in November, so they had to postpone it, which creates so many issues, and then they have to find another time slot. So they did a fantastic job. It was really well attended. And of course, a typical rural show, people are looking at the sheep shearing, the wood chopping, and there was a large contingent of horses there. The dog jumping was popular. And something else that was really, really good was the art show. It's just fantastic. And we've got some very, very talented people in and around us. So that was fantastic. And probably the only other thing I'd like to say is the work has commenced on the cricket nets up here at the Oval. So I'm very pleased about that, and I'm confident, or I know that the cricket club are very pleased about that too, because I had a phone call from them, and as per the projects update in this document, the works are expected to be completed late May. Of course, that means if everything goes according to plan. So we all look forward to having those nets completed. So that's about it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ferrari. Yes, I too enjoyed the cuppa at Warburg. I find the councillor cuppas are one of the best ways we get to find out things face to face. Community comes along, asks us questions, tells us what they want us to hear. It really does improve our knowledge of local areas that we may not get to around the Shire. I also attended a Rail Freight Alliance AGM, an ordinary meeting, where we discuss the ability to move freight around Victoria through rail. One of our biggest issues is our roads, and all we seem to be doing is building bigger and better trucks to work on roads that were designed for smaller and shorter trucks. So if we can get more on rail, the better it would be. And also had a virtual meeting with the Grants Commission, where they explained how they come up with how much money they're likely to provide to the Pyrenees Shire. And it is it might be boring to some people, but if they're going to give us a few $1 million and try and help our Shire, I was prepared to sit through the meeting and listen. And it is interesting to find out how much more per head of population we get than some of the metropolitan areas. They may get more dollars than we get, but some metropolitan councils get half the amount per head of population that we get here in Pyrenees. So it's an important group of people who make decisions about what we can spend in the following year and use it judiciously. So thank you, councillors, for those reports. We will now move into closed council to deal with confidential items. So pursuant to provisions of section 4.1.1c of the Council Governance Rules and section 66 of the Local Government Act 2020, the meeting be closed to the public in order to consider confidential items. It's the recommendation. Councillor Keogh, Councillor Clark, all those in favour. I want to thank the gallery for attending this evening and being as quiet as they have been. It's been lovely to have you here. I hope you found it as interesting as we do running it. And thank you to my granddaughter, who I know watches the streaming from Melbourne. Good night, everybody.